Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the glamorous, scandalous, and ever-evolving world of your favorite daytime dramas. Today is a magnificent day to unpack the explosive tensions brewing in Los Angeles, as the fashion industry prepares for a seismic shift that will forever alter the landscape of love, loyalty, and legacy. The atmosphere at Forrester Creations has always been a delicate balancing act of creative genius and cutthroat corporate ambition, but the latest developments have shattered that fragile equilibrium entirely. At the epicenter of this seismic shift is Hope Logan, a woman who has spent the entirety of her adult life trying to prove her worth within the hallowed halls of a company that bears the name of her mother's greatest love. For years, Hope has been the moral compass, the gentle soul, and the face of the philanthropic hope for the future line. However, the relentless pressure of existing within a dynasty that constantly reminds her she is an outsider has finally reached a catastrophic boiling point. The catalyst for this unprecedented explosion was none other than Steffi Forrester, whose authoritarian grip on the company has grown increasingly suffocating in the wake of recent corporate threats. The boardroom at Forrester Creations, typically a sanctuary of fabric swatches and visionary sketches, transformed into a gladiatorial arena where decades of suppressed resentment were weaponized. Steffi, wielding her power as co-CEO with a ruthless and uncompromising edge, orchestrated a public humiliation that was as calculated as it was devastating. Standing before the executive team, Steffi systematically dismantled the recent sales figures for hope for the future, using the data not as a tool for constructive corporate strategy, but as a razor-sharp blade designed to sever Hope's confidence. Every word Steffi spoke dripped with condescension, painting Hope's philanthropic vision as a financial burden, a vanity project that the great Forrester Creations could no longer afford to subsidize. The public nature of this dressing down was intentional, a brutal reminder to everyone in the room, and most importantly to Hope herself, that Steffi held the ultimate authority and that a Logan would always be subordinate to a Forrester. As Steffi's venomous critique echoed off the glass walls of the boardroom, a profound and irreversible transformation occurred within Hope. For years, she had swallowed her pride, turning the other cheek in the name of familial harmony and professional decorum. She had accepted the subtle slights, the overt marginalization, and the constant, exhausting need to justify her existence in a company built by Eric Forrester. But as she looked around the room, witnessing the silent complicity of those who had once championed her, the invisible strings that had controlled her every movement suddenly snapped. Hope realized in that agonizing, crystal-clear moment that she would never be viewed as an equal. She would forever be relegated to the shadows, a secondary character in a narrative dictated by Steffi's ego. The realization did not break her. Instead, it forged a new, unbreakable resolve deep within her soul. The silence that followed Steffi's tirade was deafening, a heavy, suffocating pause that seemed to stretch into eternity. When Hope finally spoke, her voice was completely devoid of the trembling vulnerability that everyone expected. It was cold, steady, and terrifyingly calm. With a posture of absolute defiance, Hope officially declared that she was leaving Forrester Creations. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for the company's current structure. She did not raise her voice, nor did she resort to the emotional theatrics that had characterized so many Logan Forrester conflicts of the past. Instead, she delivered her resignation with the lethal precision of a woman who has finally recognized her own immense value and the tragic reality that it would never be respected in this building. Hope's declaration sent an immediate, paralyzing shockwave through the executive suite, but no one was more profoundly devastated than her mother, Brooke Logan. For Brooke, Forrester Creations is not merely a workplace. It is the physical manifestation of her life's journey, the empire she helped build alongside Eric, and the kingdom she currently shares with Rich. Hearing her daughter sever ties with the family legacy was akin to watching the foundation of her own life crumble into dust. Brooke's initial reaction was one of sheer, unadulterated panic. The timing of Hope's departure could not possibly be worse. The company is already hemorrhaging stability due to Katie and Bill Spencer's massively successful rogue fashion launch, which utilized stolen designs from Eric himself. To lose Hope now, amidst this unprecedented corporate warfare, is a catastrophic blow that threatens to destroy everything Brooke holds dear. Unable to process the magnitude of the disaster unfolding before her eyes, Brooke chased Hope out of the boardroom, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The confrontation that ensued in the lavish, dimly lit corridors of the executive floor will undoubtedly go down in history as one of the most heartbreaking moments between this iconic mother and daughter. Brooke, tears already streaming down her flawless face, grabbed Hope's arm, her grip desperate and trembling. She begged her daughter to reconsider, to understand the catastrophic ripple effects this impulsive decision would have on their entire family structure. Brooke's voice cracked as she tried to impart the gravity of the situation, frantically explaining that the Forrester family is currently under siege from outside forces, and that internal division would be their ultimate undoing. But Hope was no longer the malleable, people-pleasing daughter who would sacrifice her own happiness to maintain her mother's peace. When Hope looked at Brooke, there was a chilling detachment in her eyes, a formidable barrier of ice that Brooke had never encountered before. Hope coldly asserted that she was entirely finished being a puppet for the Forrester family. She explicitly detailed the exhaustion that had seeped into her bones from years of dancing to Steffi's tune, of constantly modifying her creative vision to appease a CEO who actively despised her. Hope articulated a profound, devastating truth. Her loyalty to the Forrester name had cost her her dignity, her autonomy, and her creative soul. She was tired of standing in Steffi's shadow, tired of being the sacrificial lamb on the altar of Forrester's superiority. The sheer finality in Hope's voice pushed Brooke over the edge of rational thought into a realm of pure, agonizing desperation. In a move that shattered decades of carefully cultivated pride and matriarchal strength, Brooke Logan physically collapsed, dropping to her knees on the cold, polished marble floor of the Forrester hallway. This was not a calculated manipulation. It was the raw, visceral reaction of a mother watching her family tear itself apart at the seams. Brooke looked up at her daughter, her face stained with tears, her voice a fragile, broken whisper, and begged. She pleaded with Hope not to betray the sacred legacy of Eric Forrester, the man who had loved them, supported them, and given them a home when the world had turned its back on the Logans. Brooke's kneeling was a monumental image of surrender, a desperate attempt to use the immense weight of history to anchor Hope to the company. She reminded Hope of the current war raging with Katie and Bill, explaining how Katie's theft of Eric's designs had already pushed Ridge and Eric to the absolute brink of their sanity. Brooke sobbed, explaining that if Hope defected now, especially if she were to align herself with Katie's newly triumphant brand, it would be viewed as an unforgivable act of treason. Brooke was not just fighting for a fashion line. She was fighting for the survival of her marriage, her family, and the very concept of unity that she had spent her entire life trying to forge between the Logans and the Forresters. Tragically, even the sight of her mother on her knees, completely broken and stripped of all dignity, was not enough to penetrate the impenetrable fortress Hope had built around her heart. The emotional manipulation that might have worked a year ago, or even a month ago, bounced off Hope's newfound armor. Hope looked down at her weeping mother not with anger, but with a profound, tragic pity. She gently but firmly stepped back, physically distancing herself from Brooke's desperate grasp. Hope reiterated that her life could no longer be dictated by Brooke's fear of losing Ridge, nor could it be bound by a legacy that was actively being used to crush her spirit. Hope's refusal to yield marked the definitive end of an era, the moment the baton of Logan independence was violently seized rather than gently passed. This unprecedented departure immediately ignites a brutal, scorched-earth war between mother and daughter. Brooke, driven by a toxic cocktail of fear, loyalty, and desperation, views Hope's resignation as a deeply personal betrayal. She cannot separate Hope's desire for professional autonomy from the broader, catastrophic implications for the Forrester family. In Brooke's mind, Hope is abandoning ship during a hurricane, leaving Brooke alone to bail out the water. The resentment that will inevitably build between them will be toxic, poisoning every interaction and turning family gatherings into agonizing battlegrounds. Hope, conversely, will view Brooke's lack of support as the ultimate failure of maternal love, a clear indication that Brooke values her marriage to Ridge Forrester more than the mental and emotional well-being of her own flesh and blood. The psychological torment Brooke is currently enduring cannot be overstated. As she slowly rises from the floor, wiping the bitter tears from her face, she is forced to confront a terrifying reality. Her marriage to Ridge is standing on a knife's edge. Ridge is already consumed by a fiery, unyielding rage over Katie and Bill's corporate espionage. He views the Logan sisters' actions as a direct assault on his father's genius. If Hope, Brooke's beloved daughter, now officially turns her back on Forrester Creations, Ridge's fury will inevitably seek a target, and Brooke is standing directly in the line of fire. Brooke is paralyzed by the very real fear that Ridge will look at her, see the architect of all this Logan rebellion, and finally decide that the cost of loving her is simply too high. Ridge's perspective in this unfolding disaster will be completely uncompromising. He is a man who demands absolute loyalty, and the current landscape is a nightmare of betrayal. He has already watched Katie, a woman he once considered family, launch a global empire using designs stolen from his ailing father. Now, he will watch Hope, a young woman he helped raise, walk out the door simply because she cannot handle Steffi's management style. Ridge will undoubtedly side with his daughter, viewing Steffi's harsh critique of the sales numbers as necessary corporate discipline rather than personal victimization. When Ridge discovers that Brooke begged Hope to stay and failed, he may not offer comfort. Instead, he may view Brooke's inability to control her own family as a massive vulnerability. Meanwhile, Steffi Forrester remains the arrogant architect of this entire catastrophe. Her hubris, her desperate need to assert dominance, and her deep-seated, historical resentment of the Logan women have blinded her to the catastrophic consequences of her actions. By publicly humiliating Hope over the hope for the future numbers, Steffi believed she was simply trimming the fat from the company budget and putting a rival in her place. She failed to calculate the explosive blowback of pushing Hope into a corner. Steffi has inadvertently handed Forrester Creations' biggest rival a golden opportunity. With Katie and Bill desperately needing a new lead designer to continue their massive momentum, Hope is now a free agent with a massive chip on her shoulder, a brilliant creative mind, and an intimate knowledge of Forrester's internal strategies. The implications of Hope potentially joining the Logan brand are nothing short of apocalyptic for the Los Angeles fashion industry. If Hope aligns with Katie, bringing her immense talent, her dedicated fan base, and her righteous fury to a company that is already utilizing Eric's designs, Forrester Creations will face an existential threat unlike anything in its history. This is no longer just a boardroom squabble. It is a full-blown corporate war fueled by the most toxic, deeply personal vendettas imaginable. The battle lines have been irrevocably drawn, and the collateral damage will be immense. Every character on a canvas will be forced to choose a side, tearing marriages, friendships, and sibling bonds completely to shreds. Brooke Logan now stands at the absolute edge of despair, a tragic figure trapped between two warring factions with no hope of a peaceful resolution. On one side, she has the Forrester family, her husband Ridge, the legacy of Eric, and the empire she calls home, all demanding her unwavering loyalty and support in the face of unprecedented attacks. On the other side, she has the Logan family, her sister Katie, who is aggressively dismantling the Forrester monopoly, and her daughter Hope, who has finally chosen her own sanity over familial duty. Brooke is a woman being slowly torn apart by the very people she loves most in the world. She watches in sheer, agonizing horror as the Logan and Forrester families begin an endless, bloody war that threatens to leave nothing but ashes in its wake. The internal conflict raging within Hope is equally profound, though it is currently masked by a veneer of ice-cold determination. Walking away from Forrester Creations means walking away from the only professional home she has ever known. It means leaving behind the seamstresses, the PR teams, and the legacy she helped build. But the alternative, remaining a subservient, marginalized figure under Steffi's tyrannical rule, is a fate worse than professional uncertainty. Hope's journey moving forward will be one of intense self-discovery and ruthless ambition. She must prove to herself, to her mother, and to the entire world that she is not just a product of Forrester charity, but a powerhouse capable of building her own empire from the ground up, even if it means destroying the company that raised her. To truly understand the depth of Brooke's current despair, one must look back at the decades of historical warfare that have defined the Logan and Forrester dynamic. For years, Brooke herself fought tooth and nail against the formidable Stephanie Forrester, a woman who used every tool at her disposal to marginalize, humiliate, and control the Logan women. Brooke survived that war through sheer resilience and an unwavering belief in her love for Ridge. But as she watches Steffi operate with the exact same ruthless, uncompromising authority that Stephanie once wielded, Brooke realizes with a sickening clarity that history is not just repeating itself, it is escalating. Steffi has inherited her grandmother's iron will, but she lacks the underlying vulnerability that occasionally softens Stephanie's blows. Steffi's attack on Hope was a surgical strike, designed to eliminate a perceived threat with maximum prejudice. This generational trauma is the invisible current running beneath every word spoken in that boardroom. When Hope declared her independence, she was not just rebelling against Steffi. She was rebelling against the entire system that had historically subjugated her family. Hope is breaking the cycle that Brooke herself was never fully able to escape. Brooke's willingness to drop to her knees and beg for the preservation of the Forrester legacy highlights a tragic conditioning. She has become so entrenched in protecting the Forrester name that she is willing to sacrifice her own daughter's dignity to maintain the status quo. Hope's cold rejection of that plea is a powerful, heartbreaking assertion that the Logan women of this generation will no longer trade their self-worth for a place at the Forrester table. The days ahead will be a masterclass in psychological warfare. As Hope potentially steps into the waiting arms of Katie and Bill's newly minted, fiercely competitive brand, the battle lines will harden into impenetrable walls of hostility. Every new design, every press release, and every financial quarter will be a battleground. Brooke will be forced to walk a tightrope over an active volcano, desperately trying to soothe Ridge's explosive anger while silently mourning the loss of her daughter's presence in her daily life. The tragedy of this endless war is not just the destruction of corporate empires, but the slow, agonizing death of family bonds that were once thought to be unbreakable. As the dust begins to settle on this explosive boardroom confrontation, the atmosphere in Los Angeles grows heavy with the anticipation of the battles to come. The silence in the Forrester hallways is not one of peace, but the terrifying calm before a catastrophic storm. Steffi will soon realize the monumental error she has made. Ridge will be forced to confront the fracturing of his family, and Brooke will have to navigate a minefield where every step could detonate her marriage. The legacy of Eric Forrester, once a unifying force of beauty and creativity, has now become the ultimate prize in a vicious, unforgiving war. The characters are locked in a tragic dance of power, pride, and pain, with no easy escape routes and no compromises in sight. The narrative landscape of this beloved drama has been fundamentally and permanently altered by a single, defiant decision. Hope Logan's refusal to remain a puppet has cut the strings of the entire family dynamic, setting every character free to pursue their darkest, most ambitious desires. As we look toward the future, one thing is absolutely certain. The era of polite corporate rivalry is dead and buried. What lies ahead is a brutal, unapologetic war for supremacy, where the ties of blood and marriage will be tested to their absolute breaking limits. The edge of despair is a terrifying place to stand, but for Brooke Logan and the rest of these iconic figures, it is the only ground left. The battle for the soul of the fashion industry.